Hi, I'm Chris Folmsbee. Welcome back to Confirmation for Parents, for grandparents, for guardians, or anyone else that's interested in investing in the life of confirmation students. You know, I think one of the greatest illustrations of God's grace and love in all of Scripture is found in the parable of the prodigal son. This is a story that Jesus tells of a father who had two sons. The younger son demands his share of the family inheritance, runs away, blows all of the money, and finds himself lost, alone, and ashamed in a foreign land. But when he reaches the lowest point in his life, he has this moment in which the scripture says he comes to his senses and he decides to return back home to his father's house and to beg for forgiveness. He figures at the very least he could work as a servant in his father's household. So he makes the long trek home. And then in Luke chapter 15, verses 20 through 24, it says, "While he was still a long way off, his father saw him and was moved with compassion. His father ran to him, hugged him, and kissed him. Then his son said, 'Father, I have sinned against heaven and against you. I no longer deserve to be called your son.' But the father said to his servants, 'Quickly, bring out the best robe and put it on him. Put a ring on his finger and sandals on his feet. Fetch the fattest calf you can find and kill it, and let's serve it and celebrate with this feast, because this son of mine who was dead has come back to life. He was lost and is now found.' And so they celebrate." What an amazing picture of God the Father's love for each and every one of us. This week in Confirmation, your students learn that each and every one of us has access to this same grace and love. Through Jesus, we can be in a right relationship with God because of God's forgiveness and grace. This is the main point of our lesson today. We don't have to do anything to earn it, or when we don't deserve it. God's grace is freely given, and it can never be taken away. Like the son in this story, of course, we've all messed up, and we've made mistakes and made bad decisions and chosen our own path apart from God's ways. However, we all have the same chance to make our relationship with God right. In fact, this is the core message of what the story of God is all about. We can choose grace and accept God's forgiveness as we enter into relationship with God once again, a healthy, whole relationship. And after we've accepted God's free gift of grace, God also wants us to extend this grace to one another. This can be much more difficult. And this week, we've actually challenged your students to intentionally practice showing grace to others. We call it the wristband challenge. They're invited to put a bracelet or a rubber band like this on their arm, and every time they show grace and they move it from one to the other to represent the forgiveness towards someone else, instead of getting annoyed or frustrated or losing their cool in anger, they move their wristband from one arm to the next. And at the end of the week, they count how many times they were able to move their wristband, their rubber band, their bracelet, whatever it might be. Now, I invite you to take the wristband challenge as well. Do it with them and use it as a way to enter into conversation with your student. Perhaps you can use this challenge to practice showing more grace toward one another. And at the end of the week, ask your student, which is harder, to show grace to someone else or to accept grace? And ask, how did showing grace to others teach you more about God's grace for us? Thanks for joining us for Confirmation. We'll see you next week.